Hello, heathens! I'm Megan Angus, and this is Spinning the Wheel podcast. In this weekly audio ritual, we explore the 8 seasons of the Witch's Wheel of the Year, and we discover how it is so much more than 8 Sabbats. We weirding witches time travel through holy days, festivals, and celestial events connecting our celebrations and magic to the past, present, and future. Our cackling fills the night as we take our turn gathering the wool, wielding the distaff, and spinning the wheel. Hey, you came back. Or welcome if it's your first time. Hi, I'm Megan Angus, and this is Spinning the Wheel podcast, which is probably abundantly clear by the 45-second intro that you just listened to. But if it isn't, there it is again. Hi. What do we do here on the podcast? Well, if you've been here for some time, you know we get up to stuff and things, right? If it's your first time here, we talk about witchcraft, paganism, heathenry from a bunch of different angles. We talk about astrology and astronomy. We talk about weather patterns and migratory stuff. We talk about folklore, mythology. And I try to kind of take all of the various layers of myth and archetypal symbolism and ritual elements that we magic types tend to steep ourselves in and line them up like lenses in a telescope and help us see, right? That's what I'm doing here on the podcast. Or that's what I tell myself that's what I'm doing. Just let me live my fantasy, okay? Thank you. This week we have just a few things to talk about. So this is going to be, in theory, a slightly shorter podcast. You know me, I say that, and then it's like 2.5 hours. But we have no fixed stars to talk about this week. We have just some pertinent holy days to talk about. We do have some spicy astrology this week, but we don't have a lot of astrology. So the astrology that we have is going to be a little more influential. So honestly, I'm just going to get right into it. Um Side note, I think I'm hosting our monthly tarot circle on February Wednesday, February the 22nd, I think. It might be a tarot circle. It might be something else. It might be the start of something new. Um, you know me. I won't know until the last possible second. But tarot circle, or whatever it is that's coming next, is a free monthly offering that I host for my patrons, um, as a means of saying thanks to the folks who support me financially through Patreon and make this work possible. You'll note the only ad, in theory, that should run on this podcast is the one that I recorded. Same with my classes on YouTube. Those used to be ticketed classes. They're now free classes with no ads because of my patrons. So you can blame them. um, but in theory, our next thing is next week. Maybe we'll see. And I am still creating the year ahead astrology overview for everybody. I swear to God, I haven't forgotten about that. That is actually happening. It's just, it's required a little revision. But but yeah, that's coming too. So don't doubt me. It's all happening. It's the thing is, I really am not sold on the whole space-time thing. And so out there, where there's clocks and calendars and stuff, time is ticking by. And in here, it is just a vast sea of nebulous goo. And so, you know, time can roll by and I'm a little oblivious to it. I'm not even high. I'm just oblivious. I can't even blame substances. I'm just not locked in. But it's hard work being a time witch, okay? It's hard work. And sometimes you've got to let go of the strands and flow. Or again, at least that's what I'm telling myself. Okay, let's get into this week. Um, I'm just going to go straight through by the days because not only do we not have any fixed stars, not only do we not have a lot of holy days, not only do we have some astrology, but not a whole lot of astrology, but this lunar week is really short. It's 6-ish days versus the 7 or 8 days that we often have in a lunar week. So, okay, let's just jump right into it. Let's start with this. This is Imbolc season, waning moon in Scorpio, lunar week, who knows what, 53 slash what is time? Because we are in kind of a nebulous time out of time right now with the podcast, because I did not restart, quote unquote, restart the year with the Lunar New Year as I had last year for last year's series of podcasts. We are floating in a time out of time. And we are in alignment with a lot of ancient civilizations by doing this and floating in a nebulous zone until uh, March, until spring equinox arrives, where I will be starting the new year, quote unquote, for the podcast. Um, I know. What is this lady talking about? Don't worry, it'll never make sense. Okay. So we are starting this week with a waning half moon in Scorpio. And when we are working with our waning half moons, we are looking at the end of the process. And the half moons are always square to the sun. Waxing half moon, waning half moon, either way. The moon is square to the sun, or the sun is square to the moon, however you'd like to say that. The moon is moving faster, so technically we would say the moon is squaring the sun. And so, what do we get with waning? Well, what do we get with half moons? Half moons in general are technically a crisis point, quote unquote, but that doesn't mean that it necessarily has to be bad. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be super intense, even necessarily. So we're using crisis in the most neutral way possible, in that during a half moon, we've come to a crossroads. We've come to a moment of like, okay, we need to review, we need to adjust before we continue with the process. And if we're at a waxing half moon, we're kind of like deciding, are we going to go forward with this project or not? And if we are going to go forward with the project, what do we need to get figured out before we go forward? And when we are dealing with a waning half moon, we are asking ourselves, what am I going to do now that we are coming to the end of the project? Now that the end of the project, right? Because we have our new moon a week away, right? So we are coming to the end of whatever is happening for us in this 30-day, 29.5-day lunar cycle. And we're checking in with ourselves and saying, let me look back over the process that I'm in and be real with myself about what didn't work and what do I not want to carry forward into the next process. The other work that we can do at a waning half moon, and again, if you've been with me for a while, you've heard me say this before, but I think that this is really important, is that sometimes it isn't just about what didn't work. It's also about what did work, but could be improved upon, right? So the waning half moon can also bring up successes in our process that were small or that could have been better. And so it's a moment of being like, hey, that was rad. Glad I had a success. But am I holding on to this success in lieu of something that could be even more effective down the road? And if I let go of this success and got it out of my way, what bigger thing could come along? And it's easier said than done, for sure. And so when we're dealing with the waning half moon in that in that just that, right, the waning half moon, that sounds very nice and it's very neutral and lovely. But then we want to think about the sign that the moon is in, when it's going through these phases. And Scorpio, I don't know if you're familiar with Scorpio energy, but you get a little spicy every now and then, you get a little sassy, and it can get a little moribund, right? It can get a little spooky sometimes with Scorpio energy. Um, and all of us have Scorpio in our chart somewhere. Sorry, Scorpios, you don't have a monopoly on being spooky. So just put your leather jacket back on. It's going to be fine. But all of us have Scorpio in our chart somewhere. So whatever it is that we're working out during a Scorpio moon or while a planet is transiting through Scorpio, all of us are going to have to deal with this in some form in our life. Um, and so when it comes to this Scorpio energy, right? Scorpio is a water sign. It's about the emotive world. It's about the world of feelings, the world of intuition, the world of spiritual experiences, the world of occult or underworld or unconscious experiences or subconscious experiences. And again, Scorpio is that place in us where we have an opportunity to go into some of the spookier places, some of the deep places in us, some of the unlit places that are in us. And that coupled with the half moon can be a little heavy sometimes. Um, this can be a moment where um, we really want to take a second to kind of like check on our mental health, to be very very real about it. We want to check in on ourselves. If we're doing okay, we want to check in on the people that are around us and just say like, hey, are you doing everything for yourself that's right and healthy, and are you not doing all of the things for yourself that are not right and not healthy? And it could be that we're a little lost in our own sauce right now, and we need to have that moment of being like, wow, you know what? I went through a hard time. I started to engage in some escapist behaviors that relieved my issues for a moment, but now my escapist behaviors are actually causing me even more problems, or they're keeping me from making further progress, or they're keeping me from the work I need to be doing. It's that kind of a moment, right? It's that sort of a thing. Or, like, okay, I've done some of this work. Is it time to pull back? Have I done enough right now? Or did I dabble in this work and I didn't really get to the realist portion of this for myself, and maybe I need to go a little bit deeper? And of course, as I always say every week, I encourage you to do this in ways that are safe and healthy for you. So if you are already having mental health stuff go on for you and you're thinking about doing this work and you're like, oh, that sounds so taxing, that sounds frightening, that sounds destabilizing, then don't engage in it right now. It's fine. That work will be there for you when it is the right time for you to engage in it. Just because the astrology is doing something, just because the moon is doing something, or Jupiter or Mercury or whomst ever, that doesn't mean that it's your day to go and deal with that stuff. And so this moon also might be a moment of checking in on yourself from that angle of, am I asking myself to do work that I'm not actually prepared to do? How did I do in this last lunar process? How am I doing as we move through Imbolc season? And am I, forcing myself to think about things or feel things or work on things that I'm not really supported in? And maybe that's the stuff I need to back away from. So, you know me, I'm always going to encourage you to push yourself, but I'm only encouraging you to push yourself at the times that it's safe and right and healthy for you to challenge and push yourself. If you have been challenged and pushed by the universe lately or events in your own life, take a week off, my friends. Take a week off. Like, it's no good if we are just hammering ourselves to death with this stuff. That's literally the opposite of what we're supposed to be doing with this. So, if this is a week where it feels like, yeah, let me talk to myself about my mental health and how I am dealing with my mental health, please have that conversation. And again and again, I've said this a million times before, but I will say it a million times more. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I don't have any of that kind of training at all. I have witchy training, and there's something to that, right? There's stuff I do that a counselor doesn't do, but there's lots of things that therapists do that I don't do. So if you feel like you need to talk to somebody, please go talk to someone. It just really, really can help. It can really help in ways that you don't expect that it's going to help too. Okay. Okay. That's what's up with this week, with this particular moon that we're starting the week with. Um, when we are working with a waning moon in Scorpio for our lunar body work, we are resting, nourishing, relaxing, supporting, or otherwise restoring the organs and the processes of pleasure, reproduction, and waste management, aka sex and death. And as I say every week, not a doctor of the human corpus, doctor of space and time. So I don't know jack shit about health stuff. So please check in with your trusted health advisor if you're wanting to integrate any of the information from the lunar body information whatnottery. But as I also say every week, you can always work with the metaphor, right? So, maybe this is just about thinking about pleasure and how you interact with pleasure, or thinking about waste management and how you interact with that stuff. And how is that metaphor sitting with that mental health piece as well, right? Are you giving yourself what you need? Are you taking out the stuff that is poisonous and is not serving you? That stuff. Okay. um, for our plant body work, when we are hanging out with a waning moon in Scorpio, we are going to be planting, transplanting, or grafting for our flowering bulbs, our biennials and perennial flowers, and veggies, obviously winter crops that bear crops below ground. So our onions, our carrots, our potatoes, etc., etc. It's already starting to kind of warm up a little bit where I am. Here we are almost halfway through February, and spring is absolutely right around the corner. I expect that we're going to I'm up here in Seattle, if you didn't know that. I expect that we're probably going to get one more good snowstorm. My gut is telling me that. It's Calais that's actually telling me that. It's the crone. I think we're going to get one more big sweep through of some pretty chilly weather, and then it's going to warm up after that. That's my guess. That's my intuition. Okay. What else do we have going on? Going just straight through. Monday the 13th, we have no astrology of note. Later in the day, the moon moves into Sagittarius. Okay. What else is happening at this time? A little bit of astrology kind of off in the background. One, the sun is moving into Aquarius on this day for our folks that practice sidereal and Vedic astrology. Um, and Westerners are like, what? Aren't we about to move into Pisces? Yeah, tropical astrologers. Yes, we are about to move into Pisces. We're in the very last degrees of Aquarius, but that's for tropical astrology. For our sidereal and Vedic friends, we are just entering Aquarius. And so all that stuff that we've been talking about with our Aquarius imagery for this last month also is going to apply now. And tangent, this is a big part of why I'm so blurry with the symbolism between one Sabbath and another, is because there's a lot of crossover when we blend all of these systems together and we see, oh, here's this iteration, there's that iteration. The Aquarius stuff that we're talking about, I'm not going to talk about that in August or October. I'm going to talk about it at this portion of the year. Might be a little in January, might be a little in February, might even be a little in March. Um, but it's not going to be July. It's not going to be September or December. Not yet. Anyways, give it a couple thousand years, but that's another story for another time. All right. So, anyways, we've got the sun moving into Aquarius for our sidereal friends. And then also back to tropical astrology, we have Pluto entering 29 degrees of Capricorn, and it's going to hang out at this degree, 29 degrees of Capricorn, until March 23rd. And why am I mentioning this? Because I normally don't talk about the moment that a planet reaches 29 degrees of a sign specifically, right? Unless maybe that's making some particular aspect. The reason that I'm mentioning this is because it's kind of a big deal, especially when it comes to Pluto. And that's because Pluto moves so damn slow. This is also referred to as an anaretic degree, and I'm not going to get into that. There's a bunch of writing and podcasts and stuff from other astrologers on that. But the TLDR on this is the last degree of every sign is a kind of a crisis point. And we have a waxing or a waning half moon here that also, crisis is a word that is traditionally used to talk about the process. So this week may just have an underlying vibe of an odd tension, an odd feeling of like waiting for the other shoe to drop, or waiting for the rug to get pulled out, or waiting for the end of the magician's trick, or waiting, you're like, I'm watching the end of the movie, but it just feels like there's going to be something that happens after the credits. It's like that. It's that sort of a vibe. Is it going to be terrible? Maybe. Is it going to be amazing? I don't know. Probably not, but maybe, right? Like, since 2023, we've we left amazing back in 2016. Right? We don't do that anymore. But there's a hum to this. There's a type of tension to this. And Pluto's time in Capricorn has been a lot. It's been, a bit spicy, right? Pluto entered Capricorn at the same time as the 2008 approximately housing crisis kicking off in America, and we're sort of seeing the final results of that thing now, with a quarter of the homes in America are owned by, megacorps, right? Talk about housing crisis. Here's the way that situation ultimately played out. And that's not going to end once Pluto enters Aquarius next month. Um, but anytime a planet is hanging out at 29 degrees of a sign, it can kind of feel like this culminating, like, when the choir in the soundtrack hits that high pitched note and it just sort of it holds that high pitched note and there's this tension. It's that kind of a thing. And that's kind of what's humming in the background of this week. So I just wanted to mention that you might feel it, you might not. If you do feel it and you're like, what is this? Maybe it's that. And if you don't feel it, cool. Enjoy. Enjoy. Okay. Um, Only other thing that I want to say about Monday the 13th is, from our Roman friends and ancestors, we have the festival of Terminalia. And Terminalia was celebrated somewhere towards the middle or end of February. It might even be celebrated into the beginning of March, because Terminalia for Romans marked this time out of time moment between the end of February ish and whenever the spring equinox kicked off. And this is from a timekeeping era where their calendar ended in February. Um, Saturnalia, that we talk about during Yule season, is another one of these moments that is a time out of time type of moment, where the calendar runs for so long and then there's just sort of this gap where time is kind of not counted anymore until we hit winter solstice. And so this is another one of those moments. And there's lots to say about this. I've talked about this holiday before. I talk about it a little bit in the Imbolc class. If you haven't watched that, it's up on my YouTube channel. But there was basically a ritual of going out and marking the literal edge of the town or the village or their farmlands. And you literally went to the termination or the end or the boundary or the border of what was known to be, that city or that city state or that village or that particular town or area. And there would be a post marked out there. And individuals would go out and mark the edges of their land. They would repair their stone walls and rebuild them if they had been, knocked over by weather or something like that. And so the edges of things were fortified and honored and recognized and sort of rebuilt, or reinstated. And it literally is in honor of the god Terminus, who presided over boundaries, because the Romans were seeing in the physical world the not personification necessarily, but the embodiment of the idea of the end of the year, the terminus of the year, the boundary of the year, the end of the edge of the old year that they had been in. Um, and there might be so many of these pillars along the main road that heads into town, and so you would go out to the very edge of the road, the very end of the road, and various sacrifices might be left there, or flowers or offerings might be led there. And then in some of the versions, like in the bigger towns like Rome, fairly big town, people would go all the way out to the edge of the city. They'd have this celebration, this offering, this ritual moment at the edge of the city, and then they would make their way all the way back in, and they would stop at every one of the mile markers back as they moved in towards town. Interestingly enough, a lot of those towns and cities had 7 mile markers. 7, of course, in alignment with the 7 ancient planets that the ancient world recognized. And so you would have been starting at the post that lined up with Saturn, basically, and then moving your way back in towards the center of town. Pretty cool stuff. And it's in league with another holiday that we're going to talk about here in just a second. But yeah, cool stuff. Cool stuff. Terminalia. Okay, that is in fact everything that I want to say about Monday the 13th. So, moving on to Tuesday the 14th, Moon is in Sagittarius, hanging out in the sky. We have no astrology of note otherwise. So, we are moving on to, from our ancient Roman friends and ancestors, the holiday of Regifugium. And this is an extension of the Terminalia Festival. It's the next part of the Terminalia Festival. And basically, what happened is that the king or the czar, the Caesar, the leader of whatever the town or city, state, or state, city, town, you know what I'm trying to say, whomst ever was the leader, went through this really intense ritual. But basically, it was. That they had to flee the city. They had to start at the very center of the city and take flight, and rush out of the city as fast as possible, not be seen by anyone. And in various dates, it would actually be the leader, and at various dates, it was a proxy king, that was required to make this flight, that to flee the city. But they would rush out to the edge of town and basically jump outside of the town and then come back in again. And I wonder, because the history on this is not super great, I wonder if there isn't something about the perceived holiness of leaders at that time. Not that we don't pull that shit with leaders now, but at that time, a lot of the leaders in Rome, Greece, Egypt, and just the surrounding areas were really thought of as extensions of the gods, or somehow descended from the gods. And so I wonder if there isn't, and I'm wondering, right? I'm not saying this is the truth, but I'm wondering if there isn't something about the deity, the holiness that's perceived in this person as like coming into jeopardy if they are around when the end rolls around, right? Like they have to be outside of the known universe. They have to be outside of space time as this thing ends and that thing starts. I don't know that, but it's something that I've always wondered. Like, what is the point of them fleeing the city and nobody can see them and they can't be there, but they really can't be there? And then they come back again, like very swiftly. They come right back. So I don't know. Something interesting there. Something interesting. All right. Moving on to the next day. Wednesday the 15th, we do have some shit going down. Okay. We have Venus, first and foremost, we have Venus conjunct Neptune in Pisces at 24 degrees. And this piece of astrology, along with a piece of astrology that's happening on Thursday, I feel like might kind of be the defining pieces of astrology for this week. They might be the things that we feel the heaviest. So let's get into it. And now a brief word from our sponsor. That's me. If you love this podcast, you can support this work through Patreon. Thank you to all my patrons who help me pay rent every month. You can leave a review on your podcast service, wherever it is that you listen to this. And if you are feeling especially hedonistic, you can give it a rating. 5 stars is actually the most occult rating that you could possibly give. Also, I have mentioned this for the last several weeks, but I swear to God, this is really happening. I will be announcing some workshops and some standalone classes in the new year, both on tarot as well as paganism and witchcraft. These classes will be limited entry. My patrons will have first access to sign up, and then folks following the newsletter, and then I will announce them publicly on social media and my website. I will be rerunning the 6-week Welcome to Tarot workshop. It was super fun. I'm very excited to teach it again. It is a dope workshop, if I do say so myself. And then I will be following up that workshop with 4 standalone single-day workshops. I'm expecting them to be 2 hours apiece, probably maybe closer to 3 hours apiece. And we will be talking about material that certainly is going to build off of what is in the workshop, but you won't have to take the workshop to be able to understand what's going on in the 4 standalone classes. And then I will also be offering some more in-depth stuff than what I already have offered in terms of witchcraft and paganism, but I don't want to say any more now. All right, that's the end of the ad. Leave a rating, goddammit. Thanks. Okay, so part of why I think that the astrology of the 15th might hit kind of heavy is because the previous day is February 14th. And you'll note I didn't say anything about Valentine's Day because fuck it. Um, if you're enjoying of the Valentine's Day vibes, enjoy. That's lovely. And if you're a person who tries to avoid that stuff, welcome. Me too. But it's kind of up in our face this week. And for a variety of reasons, right? Like life is coming back. We're not done with COVID, but a lot of folks are done with COVID. And so there is a big urge to socialize and to mix and mingle, and lots of folks are eager to hook up and get back to their fun-loving ways and all of that stuff. And I don't blame anybody for that either. I wish it was safer to do, but here we are. And so there can be just in general a lot of pressure to like be socializing, be hanging out with folks, whether that means hooking up with anybody or whatever. Despite that, like there's still a lot of pressure. And then there's just pressure around February 14th. In America, it really gets shoved down your throat, and not in a good way. It really is something that's like, you'd better, have a lover or a romantic partner, and you'd better celebrate it, and you better make a big deal out of this day, or else. And if you don't have anybody to be with, you're clearly a loser. And, I don't think that's true. I think that's a lot of hokum and a lot of like capitalist pressure to buy and consume and fit into molds and all of that crap. Nonetheless, we're here. And, if you're on social media, you're going to get a face full of it. So maybe stay off, but even so, there's movies and television. And if you go to the grocery store, there's a whole aisle filled with hearts and chocolates and the whole nine. So it's kind of difficult to escape for this week. That symbolism and that archetypal stuff is up in your grill. On top of that, we've got holidays and we've got astrology that's like, yes, also and. So let's get into it. Wednesday the 15th, as I said, we have Venus conjunct Neptune in Pisces at 24 degrees. What does this feel like? Let me turn to my notes, my copious notes. It feels like ever so pining. It feels like the most romantic thing ever. And that might be really awesome or it might be really terrible depending on where you are. But with Venus, and with Neptune, both of them tend towards the extremes. So it is very possible that this will not be a day that just floats by and like ho hum. You might be feeling very good or actually quite crappy and not just an average day. If you're lucky, this doesn't hit you or it doesn't hit you hard. Or you've got a person in your life to celebrate this kind of stuff with you. So let me continue with my notes. Ever so pining, most romantic ever. Um Highly romantic, unconditional love, divine love, plunging the depths of immersive connection, um, timeless world of fantasies and magic and symbolism, uh, drenching yourself in music, losing yourself in art, um, connecting and communicating with representatives of the wordless realms in us, right? That's all very beautiful and lovely. Um, Plenty of folks do not have a person to celebrate this stuff with. So here is what I want to say with all of this. If you feel like you can engage in fantasy in a healthy way, this is an incredible day to do that. If you feel like you can move in the realms of creativity, art, uh, music, whatever, performance, whatever, and being in those spaces is going to be, fulfilling and uh, inspiring and all of that stuff, get into it. Like, this is such a dope, cool astrological conjunction for really feeling the fantasy, whatever that means for you. And for those of us who are solo in the world right now, maybe we want to be, maybe we don't want to be. Um, but this could be a really beautiful day to get in touch with the most cosmic lover forms that you interact with within yourself or within the universe or whatever, as long as you are doing that from a very purposeful place. If you find yourself wallowing in misery or sorrow, which is also very possible with this, you find yourself pining or yearning for an individual person, that's where it starts to get a little awry. So the balance here is sort of like, can I immerse myself in the cosmic sea of love without fixating on an individual person as being the source of that cosmic love? Can I instead lose myself in the sea of cosmic love, knowing that that's something that is accessible to all humans at all times? And all of us can go to that place. I don't have to get to that place through a relationship or through a relationship to a specific person. That may be difficult, right? There might be a person or particular people that really come up for you internally and are like, wow, I really wish I was with so and so, or wow, I really wish that that relationship might come back, or I wish that relationship would happen. That might come up for you too. And, if you can sit with those things and feel safe and healthy and just kind of go, okay, yep, I'm feeling that, I'm experiencing that, okay, then cool. But if it feels like you're getting lost in the fantasy, come back to shore. Come back to the shore. Um, so do I recommend marriage on this day? No. Do I recommend trying to get pregnant on this day? No. I don't recommend trying to sign any contracts. I do recommend uh drifting in a sea of beautiful cosmic goo. That's fantastic. In whatever way is safe and right for you to do so, I totally recommend it. The energies of this day are subtle and timeless and romantic. Um, and, what else do I have here in my notes? Be careful of the fantasy. Be careful for the lack of fantasy as well. That's right. That was the other thing I wanted to say about this. Um, as much as I am encouraging you to not fixate on an individual person, not fixate on a specific outcome or goal, but instead enjoy the fact that you have this depth and richness in you. A lot of astrologers out there are like, don't get lost in the sauce and don't get freaked out and don't get fixated and come back to earth and da 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 da. Because there is an opportunity to like go too far with substance on a day like this, or go too far with the stuff on a day like this. But a lot of us, and I think I said this last week's podcast too, a lot of us have been dealing with a lot of negative crap for a long time. A lot of us have had a lot of sadness. A lot of us have had a lot of grief. That's not going to go away anytime soon. And so if you can have a day where you go drift and, wear your coziest jammies and eat bonbons on the couch all day, or are coloring with your favorite colored pencils in your favorite coloring book, or rewatching your favorite fantasy movies, or rereading your favorite fantasy books, and you are able to like leave reality for a little while and really enjoy yourself in the dream state, by all means go. Oh my god, go. You know, ugh, we got plenty of reality coming for us 29/7, right? So, um, you know, but again, in ways that are healthy, right? In ways that are healthy. Um, Beautiful day for living life through symbols. Beautiful day for comparing fantasy to the mundane reality, and connecting to the timeless world of fantasy and magical symbols and all of that stuff. Really beautiful day. Beautiful day for doing magical study, spiritual study, as long as you don't really have a goal in mind and are just like sort of drifting and enjoying whatever is coming to you. Um, so, the last thing that I have written down here is enjoy the dream, dot, dot, dot. Because on the next day, of course, heavy astrology is on the horizon, right? Okay. So before we move to the 16th, let me say that also on the 15th, we have the traditional day in modern pagan uh, Wheel of the Year calendars, marking Lupercalia from our Roman friends and ancestors. Lupercalia, very in alignment with a lot of our symbolism for Valentine's Day. It's very lusty, it's very joyous, it's very frolicky and frisky and randy. I have a big old piece on my website about Lupercalia. Just go to my website and type in Lupercalia. You can read all about it. Um, and I talked about it a lot last week, so I'm not going to talk about it too much this week. So that's what's up with that. Okay, moving into the next day, Thursday the 16th, we have our balsamic moon in Capricorn. And the balsamic moon is the last phase of the moon before the new moon. It's, right at the end. And what's trippy to me about the balsamic moon is that it carries a lot of the same energy as um, the waxing crescent moon, which is the first phase right after the new moon. This is the last phase right before the new moon. They have a very similar vibe to them in that they both are sort of pulling towards something else. They're not really here. Um, the balsamic moon is really leaning in towards the future. It's like, I want what's coming. I want what's ahead of us. I want to start establishing whatever the new thing is. I want to start manifesting whatever the new thing is. It's the balsamic moon is like, I'm done with this last lunar cycle. Get me out of here. Let's go. And it's interesting that this balsamic moon is in Capricorn because our potent astrology for this day, which we'll talk about more in just a second, is that the sun is conjunct Saturn in Aquarius at 27 degrees, Saturn being the ruling planet of Capricorn. So, okay. So, first off, what do we have when we are dealing with this balsamic moon in Capricorn? We are encouraged on this day to take a look at the limits of our lives and consider how we can surpass them. I'm getting this from Moon Phase Astrology by Raven Caldera. I talk about this book a lot here on the podcast. Very into it. I don't agree with everything the author says, but I like a lot of the work that's in here, and I recommend this book. This is a moon that encourages us to be really pragmatic and hang out within the realm of possibilities. Bit of a buzzkill after our day of surfing the high seas of the cosmos just 24 hours before, right? Um, what you should be challenging is your courage and your ingenuity, not the laws of time and space and physics. This moon challenges us to be more than just an idealistic hero. We have to become practical, prepared, or we won't survive. And so, buzzkill, yes. Or a really cool, practical follow up to a day of fantasy and idealization and drifting through the possibilities and drifting in the potentials, right? We are in Imbolc season. That's the work we're supposed to be doing throughout this entire season is drifting through the potentials, drifting through the dream, drifting through the cosmos and all the possibilities. And so right after this day of this big fat conjunction between Venus and Neptune, we have this balsamic moon in Capricorn, and then, as I'm about to get into, the Sun conjunct Saturn, following right on the heels. That's like, okay, what are we gonna do with this? Here's a bunch of fluffy cotton candy dream state stuff. What of this can we concretize? What of this can we actually translate and embody into the real world? And that might be some of the work that we're doing in this next lunar cycle that's coming up. So let me get directly into then talking about Saturn conjunct the sun. Let's talk about what's a bummer about it. It can bring on depression. It can bring on suppressed thoughts or suppressed feelings. So it can be a day that has a bit of anxiety to it. Um, and it can be a real fucking buzzkill after that very romantic, idyllic energy from the day before. And looking at my notes, like I said, the last thing that I have in my notes around the Venus conjunct Neptune is enjoy the dream, dot, 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 because we come to the next day, the dreamer awakes to real life. And what I think is important about that, and these are my notes, and what I think is about important about that is that I'm still referring to myself or us as the dreamer, right? I'm not saying that the dreamer loses the dream or stops being the dreamer, simply that the dreamer is awakening to real life. And so there is, yes, a confrontation between the dream and reality. Um, and initially that might feel like a bummer. That might feel like a big no, or a we're shutting this down. But I think, because especially again, we're in the season of Imbolc, that the work that's presenting itself to us here is not let go of the dream, it's challenge yourself to figure out, how can I bring as much from the dream state as possible into the realms of reality in real, concrete ways that benefit me and community at large, of course, right? Because also we are in the season of Aquarius, and the sun and Saturn are conjunct in Aquarius. So whatever this dream is that we're bringing through, whatever this fantasy is, whatever this cosmic love is, right? It's like, it's got to be for the group. It's got to be for the collective. It's got to be something that future generations would be able to stand on. I hope that that doesn't sound overwhelming. It might. Don't think that you have to figure all of this out on your own. You're in charge of your single grain of sand. You better work that grain of sand. You better work that grain of sand. But really, none of us do this alone. None of us can do this alone. Um, it's why our exceptionalism that we're taught in the West is such BS, is because none of us ever do this alone. Collectively, we invent the dream, and then collectively we build it in the world. That's actually how this works. And so, from a bummer standpoint, this might feel like a day of losing yourself in the fantasy and then crashing back to harsh reality the very next day. In an awesome way of looking at this, you get a day off to go drift in the dream world, drift in the fantasy, um, drift in the cosmos, refill your cup with love and cosmic bliss, and then come back the next day with some loving but stern encouragement, both from the moon and this conjunction between the sun and Saturn, of like, okay, cool. What can we do to make any of that real? What could we do? Can we make all of it real? Probably not. And that's okay. That's okay. But can we make any of it real? I bet. Probably some of it, something. one piece of it at least. What might it take? And the real practical and pragmatic steps may actually present themselves on this day. So that's another reason not to get too whacked out the day before. Like, man, smoke a joint, but don't smoke five, right? Like take a half a tab of LSD, not five. Don't do drugs, kids. But if you do, do the good ones. Uh, as my mother always told me. So that's really kind of like the astrology of those 2 days. I don't have any festivals of note for this day. I mean, I know that there are festivals happening this day, but I'm not talking about them. I really felt like the astrology needed more attention here. And this is the work that's being presented to us. So, like I said, in one version of this, kind of a bummer. In another version of this, a really cool opportunity to swim in the sea of potential and then come back down to earth and start to think about what would a vessel for that fantasy look like. If I was going to try to build a vessel to hold the cosmic sea of bliss, what would that look like? What could I possibly manage to produce in this lifetime? Like, what could I do? What's my singular grain of sand that I'm working on here? That's the stuff that we've got for those days. Okay. Before I leave this day, let me say that while we have our waning moon in Capricorn, for our lunar body, we are resting, relaxing, nourishing, supporting, or otherwise restoring the bones, the hair, the nails, the teeth. So, yes, going and getting like the cuticle treatment on this day is a holy act. Yes, going and getting a scalp massage and a hot oil treatment is a holy act on this day. Yes, absolutely, 100% yes. For our plant body work, we are maintaining or breaking down old containers, borders, fences, beds, and structures. If you only have plants indoor, you've got some dying plants, you've got some dead plants perhaps, knock them out of the pots. Take that stuff down, compost the plant material, empty out the pots, get them ready for something in the future. If you have outdoor grow spaces and something is falling apart, either fix it or tear it apart and break it down to its elements, compost the plant material, get stuff ready for spring. You're not going to do all the work today. This is some of the work. This is a day to do some of that work of breaking things down in the plant world, either restore them or break them down to get it ready for growth cycle coming up. Okay, moving on to Friday the 17th. We have two things happening on this day. One, we have Mercury in Aquarius, sextile Jupiter in Aries at 9 degrees. We'll talk about that in just a second. And we also have the moon moving into Aquarius. We're not going to talk about that. Just know that the moon is in Aquarius. So, Mercury sextile Jupiter. What are we getting with this? Well, it's a Friday. This is a astro signature that really supports socializing, networking, hanging out with friends, making connections, all of that stuff. Please wear a mask, do it safely, but go out there and get it done. Um, but this also really supports, in my opinion, the transits of this week. And it gives us an opportunity to get our mind working and our optimism and our expansive ways of thinking working together. And so Mercury is able to come in and kind of put words to some of these experiences that might have been wordless. When we're dealing with Pisces, when we're dealing with Neptune, it can be a lot of stuff that's like, I can't put this into words. I don't know how to say this. I have to dance it out. I have to draw this. I can't explain it with words. By the time we roll around to Friday, Mercury is like, I can help with some of the vocabulary stuff. I can help um, think this through. I can help talk it through. I can help with some of that. And Jupiter is like, yeah, and let's be as expansive in our thinking and optimistic in our translations as possible. So it's a very nice follow up to the mega fantasy of Venus Neptune, the potentially mega bummer or at least very pragmatic and realistic moment of Sun Saturn. And then the very next day we have this follow up from Mercury and Jupiter, who are like, we've got this, dude. We can talk it out. We can figure it out. There's room to hope. There's room to dream. Why not? I always think of that Jupiter's phrase that pays is why not? Who knows what could happen? Let's give it a shot. Let's try. So I love that. I love that. It's a really wonderful follow-up. And then last day of the week, Saturn the 18th, we have um, the sun moving into Pisces. So all of that stuff that I was talking about earlier in the week with the Venus and Neptune signature in Pisces, here we go. We are about to step into a whole month of everybody and everything feeling just a little dreamier, a little more nebulous. Our boundaries might be a little hazy, our borders might be a little less defined. Um, we might be a little more fantasy oriented for this next month. We might be a little more romantic, um, a little more cherubic in this next month. Um, and utilize that in whatever way you want to, but if nothing else, that might just be a nice reset and refilling of the cup. And again, also, it's super positive reinforcement to the work that we're doing here in the last 4 weeks of Imbolc season. And yes, the sun moving into Pisces marks we are now entering the last 4 weeks of Imbolc and the last 4 weeks of winter. And so, as I always say at this time of year, make sure that you have hung out with the crone. Make sure that you have hung out with the old and the dead and the dying. Make sure that you have hung out with all of the energy and the business of last year, because we are about to push all of that stuff out and move on to the next vibe. So, whatever work you may have left over from even as far back as Samhain season or Yule season, we've got 4 more weeks to get it done. We've got 4 more weeks to say thank you and goodbye to whatever our winter work is that we needed to engage in. As I say every year, don't rush the crone. Give the crone her time, or she will take it. Um, and so if you still find yourself insular, that's fine. If you still find yourself a little shut down or a little sleepy, a little slow to get to going, that's cool. We're not in spring yet. We're not there yet. We still have 4 whole weeks. And if you're like, oh my God, I am so sick of winter, please, we've only got 4 more weeks and we're all done. So, however you would like to look at that, time is a funny thing. Pretzel time. Okay. Um, and so, we'll talk more about Pisces vibes as we move through, but I really feel like that moment with Venus and Neptune earlier in the week is basically kind of us being like, okay, time to head into Pisces season. Here we go. um, and really like open the doors to let the dream in, to let the fantasy in, um, before we move into spring and it's time to pop out and start doing this stuff in the physical plane. Okay. The only other thing that I want to talk about for Saturday the 18th is this marks the beginning of the tree month of Ash. And ash is the tree, is the wood that the world tree Yggdrasil is made out of. A lot of folks believe that the Yggdrasil was an ash tree. Ash is a tree that is often used for blessings and for sacred fires all throughout European witchcraft and heathen history. The Greeks built boats out of it because they thought it was connected to Poseidon. Um, again, as I said, the Norse believed that the world tree was Yggdrasil. The Druids worshipped the ash tree as well. And one of the great, like, pagan and heathen sayings that are out there as a blessing slash an oath is by oak, ash, and thorn. That's something. There's a really great folk song out in the world that is by oak and ash and thorn as well. Um, and what I think is very interesting is that we're having this happen on the same day that the sun is moving into Pisces, because obliquely, the well, I should say it this way: Pisces, the modern planetary ruler of Pisces is Neptune, and the tarot card that Neptune is connected to is the Hanged One. And many people believe that the Hanged One is a depiction of Odin on Yggdrasil, or the World Tree. And this is where Odin receives his enlightenment. This is where Odin receives their wisdom. They lose an eye, so it's not without cost, right? Maybe that's our Sun and Saturn moment. But gains wisdom, gains enlightenment, gains knowledge. And I go off on the Hanged Man card, or the Hanged One card, in the Imbolc class. So again, I'm going to send you back to the class to go learn more about the Hanged One. But that is the tarot card that I am encouraging us to work with this week. Even though the sun doesn't enter Pisces until the end of the week, there is so much Piscean energy that I really feel the Hanged One is the tarot card to work with this week. And consider, what it is to be suspended by spirit, what it is to be caught up in rapture, what it is to be adrift in the cosmic sea. um how, in what ways is that overwhelming, in what ways is that invigorating or rejuvenating, in what ways is that frightening, in what ways is that blissful. Knowing that these are a lot of the processes that our gods go through, our gods and goddesses go through this stuff. They exist in these spaces, they function from these spaces. And all we have to do is poke a toe in there every now and then, right? As humans, we're like, what's this all about? Oh my God, that's a lot. But sometimes it's a lot and it's wonderful. So that is our card that I encourage us to work with this week. And for our magic this week, do whatever you want to do. But I would encourage making magical art this week. I would encourage playing with watercolors, playing with pastels, doing lots of shapeless, formless stuff that are just color washes, or whatever you are moved to do. But I would absolutely, and if you're not encouraged to do visual art, dance it out, make some music, whatever that you are encouraged to make, whether that's rock and roll or some noise music or some jazz or classical, if that's just singing in the shower, which would be very Venus, Neptune, Pisces, um, in whatever way. Tap into the creator in you and also tap into the artist in you and let that cosmic bliss roll. All right, my witches, that's this week's podcast. Blessed be.